Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Season 3, Episode number 6 of Empire State Hoops. I am Adam Rothschild, and alongside me is our new co-host, taking place of Matt Vargo. This is Marquis Frias. Welcome to the show, buddy. Thank you.
What's going on, man? What's going on, guys?
Thank you for joining and taking the place of Matt Vargo, who was an inspiration to all of us here at Susquehanna University.
Most definitely.
And for what he has done, and now for you to fill in the void. Of course, you are a Knicks fan, which is great for the podcast and excellent to have on board. So what does it feel now that, what have you learned? I know you only got to meet Matt Vargo for a short time here on campus, but what are some things that you learned from him early on from what you've been able to see him do?
I definitely seen Vargo's versatility. I mean, first of all, just shout out to Vargo with everything you've helped me with for my first semester on college, and you helped me out so much with WQSU and AthCom, and just being a real student and watcher of the game more. I really appreciate it. I can definitely say it feels cool to know that I'm replacing Vargo in a way. Just because it's such a high honor, to have somebody before me that was such a great role model and student at Susquehanna University, especially for the communications major. So I'm very excited for this.
And that's the one thing I talked to him a lot about on his last episode with us last semester. And it was just a lot of things that I said, he was inspired to me and all of us. And that's the one thing about what he was able to do. But of course, hope everyone had a happy holiday, happy New Year, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and now into the new year of 2025. So it's been a little bit. The New York Knicks are about halfway through the season. We're about a month out from the All-Star break. Trade deadline not far away as well. Definitely. So it's pretty crazy that we're getting close to that point now in the season with this team led by Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And today's episode of Empire State Hoops is powered by Sport Pros USA. For more information, visit sportprosusa.com or call 877-HOOPS-NJ to make your dream court a reality today. So now getting into the season and what we have to offer so far. So we're going to recap some of these games from the past week, and then we will preview you for several of the next 3 games coming up on the schedule for the New York Knicks. So starting things off down in the city of Philadelphia at the Wells Fargo Center last week, the Knicks go into Philly. They beat the Sixers in overtime. This was a really big back-and-forth game with a struggling 76ers team that really has not had Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid on the floor that much this year. Paul George didn't end up playing. Joel Embiid did not play. Tyrese Maxey did play. And Jalen Brunson was huge in this game. OG Anunoby was huge in this game with 17. Mikal Bridges with 23. So this was a big game on the road, a big game the Knicks needed to win. It was kind of an up-and-down way to start the year, not the way everyone expected it to, especially after the blockbuster trade back in the end of September before the season started for Karl-Anthony Towns. But how do you think this game, and not just this game, but this first half of the season, how it's built up to what the rest of the season could look like?
Yeah, most definitely. So with the slow start, I mean, when you get a star player in Karl-Anthony Towns, and it's so late into the offseason. The Knicks performed this trade about less than a month before their opening for the new season. So I definitely expected them to have some minor connection issues and locker room issues, just because they haven't got that experience like the other teams have been getting so far. So I definitely did expect the slow start, but I would say that with the slow start, it kind of showed us more what we need to really work on as a team. Early on, I remember it was just the 3-point defense that was killing us. We saw it in the first game against the Celtics, and then we seen really the connection issues between Brunson and Cat and not really being able to get that pick and roll going. Now that we're in almost halfway into the season and we're seeing that pick and roll between Cat and Brunson, one of the most efficient plays in the league, I'm very happy to see that, along with the star-studded wing duo with OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. They're lining it up from free. Another concern early into the season was Mikal Bridges shooting. He's drastically improved that. He still does have his off days here and there, but that's everybody. So it's not as current as it was when the season just had started. But definitely I think what the Knicks are doing right now, they're on a roll. They're going to get those wins up. They're going to get those losses up as well, but it's not going to be as high as it was during the beginning of the season for sure.
Yeah, and that's one thing we're going to get more into in this episode a lot about several of these games that some of them resulted in wins, not a lot of them, of course, because you can't win every single game in an 82-game season. But also, we can talk about this, too, when you look at this from the 76ers side, with how it's been with their season so far, because a lot of people predicted them top of the Eastern Conference, up there with the Bucks and the Celtics of the world, and the Knicks, of course. And it hasn't panned out that way with Paul George, with Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid, who has been injured most of the season. So you look at this into this perspective. Now, for the 76ers, what you see is the problem with them being at the bottom of the East. They're in the play-in tournament towards not even making the playoffs section of the standings in the Eastern Conference right now. So the way you look at it, where does the season finish for them, and what is a possibility? Like, what in the offseason could they do? Because this is kind of, I don't want to say it's starting to backfire, but it's kind of a question mark you're putting around this franchise that hasn't won a championship in over 30, 40 years now.
I think the process is definitely kind of turning on its last wheels, definitely. It's been almost a decade now that we've seen, this franchise build around their star player in Joel Embiid. But now Joel Embiid is not even kind of their star player. Now it's kind of being handed off to Tyrese Maxey with how much he hasn't been playing Joel Embiid. So I definitely think that the 76ers are going to be one of the off-season stories when you talk about, where does a team go from here, and really what new pieces or even what kind of coaches they need in order to really have another resurgence. But definitely I would see names like Paul George maybe go up on the trade block again. Kelly Oubre, he's been a very good wing piece for them. He can possibly get traded. And the big one that I do think can happen is Joel Embiid being possibly moved out after this season.
So you're thinking 76ers full rebuild here?
I honestly do think it, just because it's been a long time since they stick to a philosophy. And, what's that one saying? Insanity is trying to do something and you get the same result and then you just do it. I messed up that saying so bad, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
The 76ers, they are that type of insanity where they've been trying to stick with Joel Embiid. They're trying to build around him, and they have yet to even make it past the second round of the playoffs, which is pretty unfortunate. It's almost like they're wasting a prime player's time in the league. So I definitely think that the 76ers are going to be an interesting story when we see them in the summertime.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm shocked you even mentioned Paul George in that conversation because of how excited he was about going to Philadelphia.
It's sad to say. It's honestly sad to say how it's like a fall, because I honestly did think that the 76ers were going to be in a position like the Cavs and the Celtics and us on top of the East. And to see that fall with Paul George not doing so well, and Joel Embiid, I do dislike Joel Embiid as a player, but it's always bad to see when one of the stars of the game can't even play because of their injury setbacks. So it's very heartbreaking to see, but I think in order for them to move on, they have to move on from some of those players as well that are not contributing to what they need to be. And
especially where his age is at right now. He's one of the veterans in this league now. He's been in this league for over a decade now, and it's he's up there in age now. So it's almost that time now, and it's like players like LeBron James were thinking about that same thing, for example. But
don't mind Brian.
Well, we're gonna get into him next episode next week.
LeBron, man. The day LeBron retires is gonna be a sad day in America, guys. Just saying it.
So now we're gonna get to the next game on this schedule. This turned out to be a good one, not in the Knicks' favor, however, against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who of course traded Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. And this game resulted in Anthony Edwards, who dropped 36 points. He had a season high with 13 rebounds and 7 assists, while Jalen Brunson scored 26 for the Knicks, and who have lost this for the sixth time in 9 games. And OG Anunoby and Cameron Payne each added 18 total. But the real only story that really wasn't really with the game, we talked about this before we started the recording, and it was the fan who hit the half-court shot to win a car at halftime.
I mean, shout out to that fan. I mean, I heard some teams need some shooters on their team, so they might need to find out that guy's number, that guy's name, and maybe see about a contract. But definitely, that was probably the more exciting moments of the game right there.
Yeah, we got to find the name of that guy and see where he's at, get his phone number or something. But anyways, some of the points that were interesting here is that with Cameron Payne, with him being the backup point guard now for Jalen Brunson, it's kind of different than the Emmanuel Quickley situation we had not even a season ago before he got traded, of course, in the OG Anunoby deal. So I don't know if it's like the similar situation, but it's a guy who's been in the league since he played behind Russell Westbrook in OKC his rookie year with the Thunder. And now seeing what his development has been, playing as a backup point guard in this league, it's still a good thing. Even if you're not the starter, it's good to play behind that star player. You're still getting the major minutes. And that's one thing we've seen a lot, and I've been able to start noticing that with Cameron Payne.
More times than I can count, I have gone on the record saying a bit negative things about Cameron Payne. And I think today I'm going to say that he's starting to rub off on me now. You mentioned how he had that veteran or that experience young into his career with veteran point guards. He started career as OKC with Russell Westbrook. That was, I think, his prime when he was on the Thunder. And then we go into Phoenix. This is a bit later in the career, but then he's right behind Chris Paul. So now you go to the Knicks, and they do need some veteranship, but they also need a backup point guard. Cameron Payne has filled that role perfectly, and I think it's wearing off a lot on Deuce McBride as well. I think once we see Deuce McBride, we're really seeing now how elite of a scorer he is and why we didn't trade him instead of DiVincenzo. As a bench player for us to have scoring, that's a huge thing, I think, with this offense, with how much of our starting five plays during the game. So I definitely think that Deuce McBride is wearing off with Cameron Payne, and those two are just really a great duo to come off the bench with.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that point up because having those two alongside each other, it kind of alleviates some of the pressure off of Deuce McBride.
Yep.
And when Cam Payne's able to fill that void a little bit, so that's always a good thing to look at.
Most definitely, and in the playoffs, I always mention the playoffs because that's where I think that was the closest we ever got into making it over the hump and getting to the conference finals or even getting to the finals. But in that playoffs, the Deuce McBride was really the only spark plug off the bench with all of our injuries. So it's definitely nice to see two different spark plugs now for this Knicks duo.
And that's the one thing this Knicks team was looking for, of course. Last year, the big spark, of course, outside of McBride, Dante DiVincenzo was the guy hitting the big-time shots. And it's a business, and he had to get traded for Towns, and that's what the result was with him now being in Minnesota. So that's what the case with this game was. Of course, when you play against a hungry Minnesota team with Anthony Edwards, with Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert, they're just trying to find a way to get a win on the road, and that's exactly what they were able to do. And it's Anthony Edwards, he's a tough guy to stop.
You can't hate on Anthony Edwards. I think he's one of the premier scorers in the league, and he's going to be a superstar. He's going to be up there with SGA. If he's not up there right now, I don't think many people think that, but if he's not up there right now, then he's definitely going to be there in the next couple of years. I think with Anthony Edwards, what's interesting is that now he's getting the helm of the Minnesota, like who they want to build around. We've seen it before with Cat, and then when they drafted Ant, they got Rudy Gobert. They got a whole bunch of key players for Karl Anthony Towns to build around. But now that he's traded, we have to hand off the helms to Ant, and he's filled that role perfectly, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And the things that he's been able to do, it's been really successful. So from what we've seen out of Minnesota, despite losing Karl Anthony Towns, they've still been able to try to find ways to fill that void, even if they're not at the top of the Western Conference. Meanwhile, in the next matchup, the Knicks, of course, coming off this loss against Minnesota, it comes into Monday where you got to play against Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. We know how that's been the past several years between the Knicks and the Hawks. But in this game, Jalen Brunson, 34 points, led the Knicks to a 119-110 win. It was the 68th 30-plus point game in Jalen Brunson's career.
That's very, very surprising to me. I didn't know it was that high already. But I mean, you can't doubt the captain, man. He's definitely been on his role now. A lot of people were talking about how he's a bit shaky in the beginning of the season, but he's definitely filling the role of the premier scorer now for the Knicks.
Yeah, and that's been the thing to watch, of course, with Jalen Brunson. And meanwhile, in this game, Mikal Bridges added 26, and Josh Hart was able to chip in 14 as well. He's been the triple-double mastermind, basically, from what it seems like. So when you have the Villanova guys doing their thing, it's always great to watch.
And it's a perfect build because, I think what's great about this Knicks starting five is that we have two ball-dominant players, you can say, with Cat and then Brunson. And then you have your swing man, which I like how you said it there on the notes, and Josh Hart. He's just going to run around, get you boards, get you assists. He's going to do pretty much all the dirty work that you want a guy on your team. Everyone wants a Josh Hart on their franchise as a fan or as a player, as a coach. So definitely you got to give Josh Hart his flowers. And then you have the two elite wing defenders. I mean, this starting five, I remember that trade when we traded for Cat. And just seeing the projection lineups and just seeing all these guys put together, I'm like, yeah, we really did make it after all these years. So it's definitely exciting with this lineup for sure.
It's been a long time coming for what it's been for, having a great lineup with good offense, with two good wing defenders and the big guy and the outside shooter.
We have capable players now.
It's just like bringing it back, just like that the Starks and Ewing. It's just like that.
Just like Starks and Ewing, man.
It's basically just replacing it right there. So once again, like we said, Knicks were able to hold on for the win. and they were able to win against the Atlanta Hawks. But there's some other things that happened in this game. Dyson Daniels for the Hawks, he was held to 14 points and 5 for 15 shooting. But another thing, too, it's always good to beat a rival, especially after you lost to them in the playoffs several years ago.
Most definitely. And we're not even talking about what happened in the last game with Trae Young shooting the dice. Now, the Knicks are they're better-minded, I would say. They're very more disciplined. They're not going to be all in your face, all braggy and stuff. But I know every time, like, it's just a human nature that every time you see somebody doing something like that, it's going to fire you up the next time you see them. I definitely feel that. I don't know about you, but you definitely probably felt it. So I think that's what they entered. They had a motivating chip on their shoulder, for sure. So I think that was really what sparked them to, come out hot and then come out to beat a very big rival in the Hawks.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I said too. Like it's the right time to do something right. Like I said up there,
hey,
that was my point of that.
Perfect shirt, actually.
Yeah, and that's what they wore on. I believe this was the MLK game. I'm pretty sure.
I believe so too. Which also makes sense with the MLK memo. But then when you make that connection with how, we got to start let's get down and dirty. And down to business with it, and that's perfectly what they did there.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what, of course, led to this win, of course, against the Atlanta Hawks, and then they didn't even get a day off the very next day, right over the East River into Brooklyn to Barclays Center, taking on their old-time rival, the Brooklyn Nets, who, of course, used to be in New Jersey, and for the Knicks in this game, we know the Nets, they have over 20 draft picks from the KD, Kyrie, and James Harden departure from Brooklyn, and for this game, OG Anunoby scored 20 points. Precious Achiuwa, surprisingly, 11 points off the bench.
Shout out to Precious Achiuwa, man. He's just, the way that we're getting all these great Knicks bench spark plugs, it's truly amazing to see. So definitely shout out to Precious Achiuwa. We have to give him his flowers one day. Yeah,
and then the one thing, of course, with this game was it's not as close as we expected it to be, especially with the Nets record and where they're sitting right now. They have some guys that are on the trade block. They just traded for D'Angelo Russell. I don't know why you would do that in the middle of a season.
It was a very interesting move, but I definitely can kind of see from a Lakers standpoint with why the move was made. But it was definitely an interesting move.
Yeah, and you put D'Angelo Russell. Of course, he was in Brooklyn many years ago before getting traded around in the Western Conference. So it's nice to see him back in that Nets uniform.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely because of all the things that he did those 2 years with the Nets, of course.
Yep.
And now, when you look into the perspective for the Nets, they also have other players that are going to be on the trade block to watch. Cam Johnson, I think, is the number one target that's going to be somewhere on a different team after the trade deadline in February.
And his role with the Nets has drastically changed from when he was on the Suns. He was just pretty much like a Mikal Bridges type of guy on the Suns, where he's a 3-and-D player. You're going to get him on the catch and shoot. You're going to get him coming off the pick and roll. And then on defense, he's going to guard 1 through 5. But now on the Nets, he's pretty much their primary ball handler, primary scorer. He's doing it really all the work for them. Also with Cam Thomas being out, who's also probably going to be a trade target in this trade deadline. So it's definitely interesting to see the pieces that they have, and I do want to see how the Nets resurge from this rebuilding year for sure.
Yeah, and that's been a thing to watch with the Nets, of course, with this rebuilding year. And there's one thing that Matt Vargo always talked about was capture the flag, going for Cooper Flag, of course. So he's going to be the big target coming up in the draft, of course. So that's going to be a big thing to watch as well. And another thing, too, about that you talked about to me prior was the Knicks aren't really that good off of back-to-backs.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, it worked out really well.
Yeah, so, I can go back to, different times with the Knicks this season where they haven't been that good off the back-to-back. But it's explainable just in the sense that we have 4 of our 5 starters in the top 5 minutes played during this season, which is honestly incredible. I have never seen it anything like that before. But back in... I believe it was December, Jalen Brunson, where he dropped his 55-point game. The very day before was a game against Orlando. So that game against the Wizards was close. It went into overtime. And something that, of course, that Knicks fans shouldn't expect is a game with the Knicks and the Wizards in overtime. Same how they didn't expect it for it to be a close game with Brooklyn. But it's explainable in a way with coming off a back-to-back. And it was the Hawks as well. So that's a team that you for sure want to beat. You want to give it your all against a rival. So definitely an explanation to why it was such a close game with Brooklyn.
And, of course, after this win against the Nets, the Knicks improved to 8-0 when holding teams under 100 points this season.
That's honestly great that we held a lot of teams, or at least 8 teams, to 100 points this season, just because defense is our monarchy, and whenever you see stats like that, that really proves that, it's the grind is really on the defensive side rather than the offensive side.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been another important thing to watch as well, and how this defense is able to slow down their opponents, and the Knicks have been able to do that for these stretches. But coming up after the break, we will preview the next 3 games for the New York Knicks. They got a couple Western Conference matchups coming up on the schedule, those being the Sacramento Kings, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Denver Nuggets. And we'll talk about that right after the break here on Season 3, Episode number 6 of Empire State Hoops. We'll be right back.
Hey there, basketball fans. Are you ready to take your love for the game to a whole new level? Well, listen up. We've got something that will make your hoop dreams come true. Introducing Sport Pros USA, the ultimate destination for all your backyard sport court needs. Whether you're a diehard Knicks fan or just looking for some slam dunk fun with your family, Sport Pros USA has got you covered. Picture this. It's a sunny afternoon in New York, and you step out onto your very own custom-built backyard basketball court. The court where legends are born and memories are made. A court where you can unleash your inner baller and shoot hoops like your favorite Knicks players. But it's not just about basketball. It's about family, friends, and fun. Whether you're hosting a game of horse with your buddies or teaching your kids how to dribble and shoot, Sport Pros USA brings the magic of the game right to your doorstep. Our courts are more than just a place to play. They're a place to connect, bond, and create unforgettable moments. And with Sport Pros USA, you can have it all, right in your own backyard. We're not just building courts, we're building dreams. Dreams of buzzer beaters, comebacks, and endless laughter. So why wait? Give us a call at 877-HOOPS-NJ or visit sportprosusa.com today to start designing your very own backyard basketball court. Remember, at Sport Pros USA, we believe that every home deserves a court, and every family deserves the joy of playing together. So don't just watch the game, be a part of it.
And we are back here once again. This is Season 3, Episode 6 of Empire State Hoops. I'm Adam Rothschild, and alongside me, for his first episode ever on Empire State Hoops, this is Marquis Frias.
Thank you for having me once again. I'm very honored to be here.
Once again, great to have Marquis here on the show. Once again, he is the new co-host in place for Matt Vargo, who has continued the journey on his endeavors beyond Susquehanna University.
I'll serve you right, Vargo. Don't worry about it, man.
And with that, we'll continue on here into the second half of the episode. And now to preview the next 3 games upcoming for the New York Knicks, starting off this Saturday against the Sacramento Kings. And the one thing I want to talk about with the Kings, they fired Mike Brown earlier this season when the Kings were struggling.
Yep.
Then you bring in Doug Christie. Doug Christie was on the Kings back when they went to the conference finals, the semifinals, 2000 to 2002, all those runs.
Yep.
When they had that team of Vlade Divac. He was the backup point guard to Jason Williams and Mike Bibby. So it's interesting that he was the assistant in this situation, and he happened to come into this situation, and somehow he turns it around and they go 10-2, and now they're the 7th seed in the Western Conference. So
definitely a very big turnaround for the Kings. I remember they were viewed as they were projected to be a top 5 team with that DeMar DeRozan pickup, who I honestly really love. Shout out to DeMar DeRozan. He's one of the best scorers this league has ever seen. But they were definitely projected to be a very higher team early on, and they just didn't get it done. I don't like the move with firing Mike Brown, just because he has proven that he's able to coach. So it's not a him issue. I think it's just more of a lineups issue or personnel issue, but definitely not Mike Brown's fault, who's coming off a Coach of the Year around 2 years ago, that's when they had that 3 seed, but unfortunately lost in the first round to the Warriors. But I think definitely that this Kings team, I want to see them, succeed. But I mean, not with this game for right now. I definitely want the Knicks to win this, so we'll see how that goes.
yeah, I think this will be an interesting matchup. And the one thing that you mentioned to me earlier was the center matchup. Sabonis against Towns. I mean, 2 all-star centers going at it. That's going to be fun to watch. And the one thing I also listened in too, I watched the Netflix series Starting 5, and they talked and when the Sabonis stuff came up, it's the stories are so interesting with his dad and how it's just so interesting how it's like the way they played was so similar. Like how they pass and everything, and the eye coordination they have on the court. It's insane.
Arvydas Sabonis entered the league when he was around 31, and that's because he was from a foreign country. I don't know if you know it, but I believe it's Slovenia.
Yes.
So he was he was from there, and obviously at that time, I believe it was around the 90s that he was a rookie. They didn't have the same type of basketball or recruiting system as they did in America and Slovenia at the time. So it was very interesting to see, this big 7-footer Slovenian guy coming down the court, dribbling the ball in the 90s, and then he's just doing a behind-the-back pass to his teammate for an open layup. So you definitely see the similarities with Domas and his father within their play. And you talked about the similarities between Sabonis and his father, but the similarities between Cat and Sabonis are even similar just because of how much they roam around the paint. They're stat stuffers, so Sabonis is definitely going to get his triple-double or double-double on the night, and so is Cat. So this is definitely going to be one of the most premier battles this week for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be great to watch. And not even that matchup, the point guard matchup. Jalen Brunson and De'Aaron Fox, two of the most explosive guards in this league. That's going to be fun to watch as well. So seeing those guards duel and the big guys duel is going to make it a ton of fun.
Most definitely. And I think when you have those type of matchups, we kind of got a taste of that with the Wolves, who they have their respective stars in Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle. You got the Hawks with Trae Young and Clint Capella. And then you also have Philadelphia with Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid, who didn't play that game. But whenever it's a star-studded matchup, you always got to keep your eyes out and see really who comes out victorious in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the way this game is going to go, this can go either way because of how good these teams play each other.
Yeah.
And for how exciting it's going to be, of course. But now getting into this next game, of course, the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that I really haven't talked about on this podcast in a while, honestly.
I haven't talked about them at all this season, really. And I'm doing research and I'm seeing, they have a very elite defense. They have a league-leading offense with 123 points a game. And, I mean, you look at all these guys, and it doesn't really look like that type of offense or that type of team that you could honestly say that John Morant is doing all of it. But it is like you have a widespread scoring. They have Jalen Wells, who's their rookie guard. I believe he's coming to the bench and getting some scoring done. And then you have Zach Edey. A shout-out to my dad. Me and him love Zach Edey. We call him ZD Edey sometimes. So definitely Zach Edey has made a difference around the boards and with those second chance opportunities for them. So when you see the Knicks being the third best team in the East and then the Grizzlies being the third best team in the West, this is definitely a marquee matchup for this week. So I'm very excited to see how this one goes.
Yeah, it's going to be something to keep an eye on because I feel like the media has not talked about John Morant enough this year.
Not enough.
I haven't heard his name maybe once, Like, it's honestly shocking to me. Like, if he doesn't get an all-star vote, I'd be shocked.
I would be shocked as well. I mean, John Morant, he's definitely one of my favorite players in the league. And, I mean, we all know stuff that happened in the past with him and the allegations. But you could definitely say that John Morant is still a star in this league, even though he's had those stuff in the past. I think with the media not portraying them as well as they have in the past, it definitely puts an effect on, hearing about these games. Like you said, how you haven't heard about them. And I honestly haven't heard about it either. But I think definitely John Morant and the Grizzlies need their flowers and definitely deserve more respect in the West.
Yeah, absolutely. With how stacked the Western Conference is, with the Lakers of the world, the Warriors, and the Denver Nuggets, who we are just about to talk about. And, of course, that's what it leads up to with a team like Memphis, like we mentioned here, being in that part of the Western Conference and having to deal with how stacked it is, of course. And now getting into this final game of preview before we close out the episode, the Denver Nuggets. They are the Denver Nuggets. And we know what they are capable of course, winning the championship over the Miami Heat several years ago, which I've talked about a lot on this podcast. And now with them going against the Nuggets, it's Karl-Anthony Towns, it's Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
It does not get better than this.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to focus more on the Cat Jokic because I mentioned the Cat and Sabonis matchup prior, and I said how that's the top centers in the league. But now this is a top 3 center battle. I mean, you got Jokic at 1. I'll plug Wemby at 2, and then you got Cat at 3 most definitely. So this is going to be a very interesting battle. I think with Jokic, just how he's been playing this year, it's such a consistent level. I mean, it's not going to show up on the tapes, but if you look at the stats, I'm telling you, it's beyond generational type talent that Jokic has been producing this season. So I definitely think that the Knicks, I'm interested to see how we guard this type of player. I mean, because he can just do it all at all 3 different levels with rebounding, pass making and playmaking, and then just getting a bucket whenever he has to. So I'm definitely interested in this. This is definitely like we got to put a star on it for this game for sure.
Yeah, I think there's going to be other players to watch too, of course, for the Denver Nuggets. Also, Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon definitely as well, because these are guys that can just make flashes out of nowhere and seem like they'll just come out and make a big-time play.
Exactly.
So that's what you got to look for in this game.
And both of these teams are filled with those type of players. I mean, you've said Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon. And then you also have Russell Westbrook, who hasn't been getting talked about as much. He's been hooping recently. If you look at the numbers, he's been putting up 20 points, and he's been doing that off the bench, which is what what the Nuggets really needed, a bench spark plug, most definitely. But then you have the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's going to get you a bucket. Karl Anthony Towns, he's going to get you a rebound and then come down the floor, get an and one bucket in transition. So it's definitely, this is a star-studded preview once again, and I'm definitely excited to see how this one goes.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Yeah, I can't wait to see how this one goes down. And, of course, we have a lot of more fun games to look forward to, especially next week when we get into a lot more. We'll recap all of these 3 games, and then next week, it's the Lakers on my birthday. I cannot wait to watch that. That will be amazing. Fantastic.
Is it in the Garden?
In the Garden, yeah.
Oh, perfect.
It's in the Garden.
It's LeBron in the Garden, yeah. That's always a treat, man.
So we'll get to talk a lot more about LeBron James and the Lakers next week. It's going to be absolutely fun. But from here, this episode of Empire State Hoops has been powered by Sport Pros USA. For more information, visit sportprosusa.com or call 877-HOOPS-NJ to make your dream court a reality today. So, we got to recap a lot of these games coming into the new year here in the month of January. February is right around the corner. The All-Star break, around the corner.
One of my favorite times of the year, most definitely.
Absolutely, with the East and West, which came back last year, of course.
Yeah.
And the trade deadline right around the corner as well. And we got to recap all of that. And coming up next week, we're going to be talking the Lakers and even more matchups coming up in the month of February for the New York Knicks. But from here on Empire State Hoops, I'm Adam Rothschild. That's Marquis Frias. And we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a good one, guys.